So it's a couple of minutes past the hour now. I'll let people come in, but I wanted to do an introduction now because we've got some really good panelists. I don't want to take away any more time from what they've got to have to say. So I'm Georgia Halston. I am co-founder of Sustainability Partnerships. As I said, this is the second part of our Sustainability Partnerships Climate Change Summit. This morning we had 3 panelists who came to talk to us specifically from the perspective of the NHS. This afternoon we're speaking to people who are specifically solutions providers, particularly for some of the problems and issues that we spoke about this morning. I've got Becky, who's going to start us off, and then we're going to move on to, she's going to then introduce Julian, and then we've got Nigel. So Becky's from GB Partnerships Group. I'll let her do her introduction because she's much better at doing that herself, and I'll let Nigel introduce himself from the Community Health Partnerships as well, and Nigel is from Novalu. What we're going to do is we'll have a Q&A at the end of the session. Please use the chat function, feel free to say hello to each other. We had loads of chat going on, there was a bit of a conversation going on while the presentations were happening. Please use that, and then for the Q&A at the end, please use the Q&A function. So I'm going to hand straight over to you, Becky.
Okay.
And allow you to start. I think Julian's going to start sharing his screen, and you're going to go through the slides.
Brilliant, thank you.
Perfect.
Thanks, Julian. So I'm Becky Jones, and I'm the Corporate Social Responsibility Manager for GB Partnerships. And I'm also the Sustainability Lead for Cheshire and Merseyside Health and Care Partnerships. And I'm just going to talk a bit about the policy development and the importance of policy around sort of setting out your sustainability journey. Thank you, Julian. So I just wanted to start off with the slides. Sort of maybe state in the obvious for some people, and maybe a bit shocking for others. And just to say, you know, right now we are in the middle of a climate crisis. It's not something that we need to plan for. It's not something that's coming down the tracks in the future. It's something that's happening right now, and we're all seeing the effects of it. And it's not something that's come out of the blue. It's, you know, it's something that's been happening for a while, and it's an emergency. And I don't know about you, but if I hear the word emergency, I'm like, it's got emergency about that quick. But we've known about this for hundreds of years. And the first person to write and make a connection between carbon dioxide being put into the atmosphere and climate change was an eminent scientist, American scientist called Eunice Foote. And back in 1856, so 165 years ago, we knew that this was a problem, and we're calling it an emergency, and we're still not really doing anything about it. So finally, for 165 years on, the NHS, the 4th biggest employer in the world and one of the biggest polluters in the country, 5.6% of the total carbon footprint comes from the NHS. Finally, the NHS has got something in place to try and deal with it. Thanks, Julian. There's a couple of presses on this one. Thank you, that's it. So the NHS have looked at the greenhouse gas protocol and looked at that using the defined scopes that they've got within the greenhouse gas protocol. So scope 1 is the emissions you can directly control. Scope 2 are things that you can indirectly control, such as the purchase of energy. And then scope 3, which is the more complicated and difficult one, which is around the supply chain. And 60% of the carbon footprint emitted by the NHS is held within the supply chain. So, and that links in with the Climate Change Act. And then back in February last year, NHS created the Greener NHS programme, and that's got 2 targets to achieve net carbon zero. So looking at scopes 1 and 2, it's how can we be net carbon zero by 2040, and then looking at scope 3, which is called the NHS carbon footprint, and that's to be net carbon zero by 2045. Thanks, Julian. So the NHS have put that in, and I'm sure this is quite a commonly seen slide. The NHS have put that into NHS carbon footprint scopes 1 and 2, things that we can easier control, and then NHS carbon footprint plus, which is essentially the supply chain together with patient travel. So we've been baselining it on emissions from 1990, and we've just had the 2021 emissions released. That's right, thanks, Julian, that's okay. So when you're thinking about your organisation, your system, strategy to sustainability, these are the things which you need to think about in terms of baselining it. And you can't do it silo thinking. Climate change isn't an individual responsibility. You can't just look after your section and think you've done a great job. It has to be across everybody. So thinking about things such as medicines, for example. So an MDI inhaler, meter dose inhaler, has got a carbon footprint of 175 miles, and that's the equivalent of driving from Newcastle to Liverpool. A DTI inhaler, which is pretty similar, almost exactly the same, has got a carbon footprint of 4 miles. So those are the kind of things which you can really impact and really make a difference as you're planning your sustainability journey. And if you look here in terms of the NHS activity type, obviously most of this is in the acute because that's where the biggest emissions are and they're just bigger. But in terms of how can we make a change, how can we start to change people's behaviours, primary care is a really good way of doing it because you can change the way things are prescribed. Obviously COVID's helped in terms of how people access, we don't travel so much, but all of this is a really good way of changing behaviours, focusing on the things that are big within your area that you can make a difference on, and then really starting to reduce the way that we consume things. Thank you, Julian. So when we think about sustainability, people tend usually to talk about the planet, and that's obviously important. But when you think about sustainability, it's the planet and the economy and society, and all of those areas have to come together. And so when you're planning your sustainability approach and the key things that you want to focus on across your systems, those are the things you've got to think about. And the Greener NHS programme only really looks at the planet, it doesn't look at the rest. So if you put something in place which is going to be great for the planet, but it might have a disproportionately adverse effect on the people, then that's not going to be sustainable. And so that's not the kind of thing which we can start to implement. Thanks, Julian. So as I said earlier on, I'm the sustainability lead for Cheshire Merseyside Health and Care Partnership. So one of the first things we did was implement a strong governance framework. And around that, we've started to develop our sustainability framework and processes. So we've got the sustainability board. We've got an ambassador for that who's a local GP. So that's really good to have primary care on site. We've got about 100 people that attend that are on the circulation list, and we always get really good attendance at the board. I also sit on the Strategic Estates Board. So as we're planning for the future, as we're planning our infrastructure, we need to consider the sustainability. So it's really important we have those links, and also the social value element. How can we make sure that we get long-term impacts from the estate? So that links into the population health board and ultimately into the exec board. So it's having that whole system approach so we can link into everybody, and not just within the NHS, but local government, voluntary sector and business as well, because it's having that whole approach and that whole system framework, which with our key priorities, which is what's going to make a difference. So we have different subgroups. So we've got to have all trusts have to have their green plans in place by the 4th of January, and then all ICSs by the end of March. So we've got a system of subgroups working across Cheshire and Merseyside, each of them looking at different areas, and then we're pulling together the best practice, the leads in each area, so we can share good practice and come up with common goals and common priorities across the system that can really help to make a difference. And it's not just across Cheshire and Merseyside, we also have the North West Board, so we attend the North West Board. Through that, we were able to get some funding for primary care. So we've now got a primary care green lead, if you like, so to give some capacity to the backfill the GP. Obviously delivering again on the Greener NHS programme, but also Cheshire Merseyside is a social value accelerator area. So we've got social value reward, we've got social value charter, and one of the things we're working on now is the Anchor Institute, which is a really important element of this whole programme. And as ICSs have to be looking at how to reduce inequalities, this is a really important way of doing that. So we've got a webinar coming up in November, and then fingers crossed a live event in January, where we're going to be looking at what are the social and moral responsibilities of organisations that want to be seen as an anchor, a key organisation in this area. What are the key principles we need to sign up to, and what are the behaviours that we need to espouse? Because all of that is a part of the wider sustainability agenda. Thanks, Julian. So just to look at the estate, because Julian's going to pick up on the estate in a bit, 15% of the total NHS carbon footprint is from the acute estate, and that's just massive. So obviously we've got the new hospital programme coming in place, which is going to look at, for the future, but we need to look at retrofitting, we need to look at lots of different innovative ways that we can put in place so that we can help to make the existing estate better and more sustainable. And from a primary care perspective, although we say primary care is small, we've still got 7,000 practices over 9,000 buildings that emit a lot of carbon into the air. So again, it's working together working across the primary care networks, working with colleagues across the whole system to come up with a joint policy approach. That's what's going to make the difference. Thanks, Julian. So just very finally from me then, yes, we are in a mess, but there is hope. There's always hope for us to move on. And when considering your sustainability plan, you've got to think about the whole plan, the whole elements all together. And if you plan properly with colleagues across the whole system, that's the way that we're going to get the best outcome. So think about social value, think about how you can reduce health inequalities, yes, deliver the greener NHS programme, but all of those together is what makes a difference. And I'm happy to have any conversations with anybody on how we can make that happen. And that's it for me. Thank you very much. I'll pass over to Julian.
Thanks, Becky. Yeah, sorry, technology nearly let me down there for a moment, trying to put sounds on and turn sounds off. And that's, I think, my front door going. But so the purpose of the second part of this is a brief overview of our the Foshill Health Centre that we recently completed in Coventry. It's been built by CHP, as you can see from the brand and logo. For those of you who are not familiar, Community Health Partnerships is one of the NHS's property companies, a wholly owned subsidiary of the Department of Health, primarily focusing on PPP developments over the past 10 to 15 years. And we're currently the head tenant in 308 of the 400 odd buildings that we've developed in collaboration between the public and private sector, and CHP are the 40% public sector shareholder. But Foshill's been a long story for the local community in Coventry. While this slide actually indicates that the outline business case was approved in August 18, it actually goes back some years prior to as being a priority for a new facility in Foshill. It's been a significant development and a significant priority. But from August 18, we finally got approval for the outline business case. And at that point, CHP, in collaboration with the department and the social and the CCG, it was proposed that CHP would deliver this as part of its capital programme. And at that point, CHP had been doing some work on passive designed theory, proof of concept, how would passive work in a primary setting. This opportunity came along and we suggested to all parties that we undertake this small build and deliver it as a passive designed, passive accredited facility. A little bit more on passive accreditation and passive design in a moment or two. But you'll see from the timeline that we went from August 18 to August 21 to ultimately complete the build, and the GP surgery, Coventry and Rugby GP Alliance, our tenants, moved into the building. The key point to pick out of this slide is it was built via off-site means using porta cabin modules. The first module arrived on site on the 8th of December 2020, and the building was watertight on the 11th. That's 3 days. So anybody who's worked in construction or on building projects, to go from a flat slab to a watertight building in 3 days is quick, should we say. It's probably the only, there are a couple of other words that come to mind, but quick is probably the most likely. And most recently, just earlier this month, we received the formal Passive House certification and accreditation for the build, which makes it the first passive healthcare facility in the UK. I paused there for effect. No, not really, but it is the first. So there's been a leap of faith by the CCG, NHS England, and CHP to deliver a first, and you'll see why it's a first shortly. One of the things that's mentioned about passive, oh yeah, it's great, great principle, love to do it, but it's expensive to build. It's expensive to build. It costs more money. Well, yes, the initial capital cost for the build at Fowes Hill is probably about 15 to 16% over what a traditionally built facility would be. But we can't just look at its immediate capital cost today. We need to look at the life cycle, the whole life cost of the building and the ownership of that asset over time. When we ran these, we ran a whole series of whole life costing models, and this is the one that's actually in the business case, and it shows a break-even point at around year 20. And I've got a model that actually showed it a little bit earlier and a little bit later, depends on the numbers you put in it. But from the recent press you've seen, and perhaps even from your own electric bills or gas bills that you're seeing, energy inflation is moving at a pace. The basis for this whole life model is a 1% energy inflation increase. Now, if you can buy your energy with a 1% inflation increase, do share the details, because I'm sure we'd all like it. The reality is it will not be 1%. And we suspect our long run average that we ran was at 6 or 7%. We think it may well be higher than that over the 25 years or 40 years life of the building. But so in which case the payback period, the break-even point for the increased capital cost comes earlier in the equation, and significantly earlier in the equation. So from our perception, yes, we've got something that was more efficient and more effective, improved whole life cost over the life of the building, break even at year 2025. With inflation and with rising costs, that break even point will come even earlier. So the additional capital cost will pay back sooner than we currently forecast, or the business case is forecast. One of the key benefits for adopting a passive approach is very simply energy efficient buildings. The slide on the chart, you only really need to look at the big column on the left-hand side and the very little column on the right-hand side. The left-hand side column is a typical NHS clinical building energy consumption kilowatt hours per square metre. The far right-hand side is the actual outcome for Fowes Hill. That's the designed performance that Fowes Hill will get to. So it is a tiny consumer of energy. And I should add, there are no fossil fuels in Fowes Hill. There's no gas. It's all electric. It's all sourced from green supplies. And you can't see from the photograph behind me, but there are PVs on the roof as well. So it goes to culture and approach that we eliminated fossil fuels. So there is no gas. So we won't see a gas energy inflation. As part of the process, we've done a number of comparison case study activity, and case studies will be available sort of fairly shortly. But when we look at a benchmark with a similar facility in the West Midlands, yeah, similar size, program-wise, significantly less on-site activity. The figure on there is 13 weeks. I probably could make a case for it being slightly more than that, but 13 weeks, that's a quarter of a year. It's a significant saving. Yes, there was a slightly increased capital cost, but the overall operating cost, renewals, maintenance, utilities, energies, and the overall cost over time, significantly less. And an A-rated EPC. For those familiar with the EPC process, EPC to be A-rated, 0 to 25, I think Fowes Hill is rated as 12, scores 12. And from an energy performance point of view, 0 is net zero. So we are very close to a net zero EPC. It wasn't a driver when we set out on this journey 3 years ago. If we were doing it again today and delivering Foes Hill, net zero would be a target without a shadow of a doubt. And we're currently investigating some processes, methods, types of construction that we believe will be able to deliver a full net zero. Back in December 2020, Her Majesty's Government came out with the construction playbook, and it picks up the 8 or 9 points that you'll see on the left-hand side of the slide. So innovative products, focus on whole life carbon, use of off-site, outcome-based delivery from a project point of view, early supply chain engagement and involvement in the projects. Foes Hill started before the playbook was published, but Foes Hill delivers on all of those bullet points. Now, some should say I knew what the playbook was going to say before it was published, and no, we didn't. But there was a leap of faith, a vision and a strategic direction from CHP corporately to make a step change and try to deliver a passive, more energy efficient, low energy building for Coventry and for the NHS. And to that end, we believe we have. The headline is it the greenest healthcare building in the UK? Yes, we believe it is. I'm happy for anybody to come back to me and say, oh, no, Julian, it's not because we've done this, this and this, but it's very close to being net zero. It's passive certified. It will be BREEAM excellent. It is more energy efficient than any other building that we've developed over the past 10 or 15 years. We hope that actually Foes Hill will act as a catalyst, as a stepping stone, as an inspiration perhaps to aspire to be more energy efficient, to reduce our carbon footprint further. As Becky has alluded to, the buildings are a significant part of the carbon footprint. Retrofitting to passive standards can be done. It's not simple, it's not easy, but there are some simple steps that can be done. But from a new build point of view, taking a fabric first passive approach is probably a good starting point. Thank you.
Thank you both to Becky and to Julian. Becky, first of all, I mean, echoing exactly the sentiments that we had this morning from the guys in the NHS in terms of a holistic view, you know, not doing things in silos, everyone thinking, you know, this is everything is everyone's responsibility, and we should all work across everything as much as possible. And then Julian, yeah, I think some of the, you know, the timelines that you're alluding to there as well, I think that when we talk about sustainability, we should be talking about future proofing. We're not just talking about, oh, you know, this building can do this thing now. We're talking about what can it do in the next 20, 30, 40 years, and is it going to be sustainable in terms of future proofing as well. Foes Hill is such an interesting example of what can be done, and not only do I think that it's an inspiration, Julian, I think that it's kind of there as a standard. You know, it can be used for people to say, well, if they can do it, why can't we? And I think that the stats that you've got there should be used to say, you know, near net zero, if those guys can do it, what is the excuse going forward for other people? So I really appreciate you sharing that case study. And if anyone does want to get in touch with Julian or Becky, please let us know. There's a question already in the Q&A, but we'll take that later after we've gone through Nigel's presentation. Anyone does have any comments, questions, any of their own experiences or points of view, please put them in the chat. We'd love to see everyone jump in and turn this into a bit more of a conversational event. So Nigel, I'm going to pass over to you, and Nigel from Novalu is going to share his presentation now. So I'll go on mute and let you take over.
Okay, thank you very much indeed.
Nigel, you got that? Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So yeah, Nigel Codman, I run a business called Novalu. the rationale of what we do is actually in the name. We put new toilets in. We're a small part in the many cogs that are involved in organisations like NHS. We work in other organisations as well, but I'm talking primarily, obviously, about NHS here. And our aim is to reduce the use of water. If I give you an example, that one of the hospitals that we worked with did some testing of their main toilet block, and came back with 167 flushes per day of each and every toilet. Each and every one of those toilets was using 9 litres. Our toilet uses 1.5. The quicker of those of you with maths will soon work out that the amount of water that could be saved, and by implication the amount of CO2 that can also be saved, is vast and huge. So we're about saving water. We say they're saving the planet, and that's a bit of a big claim, and I understand that. But if ever any of you saw pictures of Victoria Falls about 2 years ago, when it was running with no water over its soul, this is one of the largest waterfalls on the planet, and the amount of drought impact had stopped that waterfall. That's happening everywhere else now. Let me just share a couple of things with you. The United Nations, no less, are predicting there'll be a 40% shortfall in global water supply. 2030 is now 9 years away. And we often think, I think here, that it doesn't affect us as much. Well, it more and more does. The impact of things like the pandemic. I was with my granddaughter yesterday, which was absolutely wonderful, reminding her when she washed her hands that she had to still sing happy birthday. And of course, that has actually increased the amount of water used in washrooms by 25% just in the last year alone. It's staggering, the impact of that. So water demand globally is actually expected to increase by about 55% over that period of time. The vast majority of that is happening very, very quickly, very, very soon. And the impact of an employee at work, let alone as we have in NHS sites, the many visitors, patients, etc., is huge. The amount of litres of water that is flushed down a toilet is a frighteningly large figure. Something like half of the water utilised in washrooms is flushed down the toilets. Urinals are still a large part of that, but more and more people are moving away from urinals for all sorts of different reasons. But those places where there are them still, you've still got the ladies with no urinals in. You'll still not be surprised to hear that are there. So we know that those figures are going up. We also know that there are issues around the impact of those available toilets. We know that there are often queues. We know that toilets take a long time to refill. Well, that's very simple. It's just because they have 9 litres of water often to go in. That's an average. There are some down at 6, there are some up at 12. 9 litres is the average that we have found across many sites. Their hygiene is an impact. I'll talk more about that in a moment. And of course, they have high maintenance costs associated with them. And that often leads to increased costs and a drop in productivity. Julian said in his talk quite rightly that the costs of energy are going up. Costs of water are going up. It was only a month ago that in Southern Ireland, they doubled the price of their model of how they charged people. Now, that's a different model to here, but we've already seen many water wholesalers and thus retailers increasing their costs radically. And I can only see that continuing on over the next few years. So I'll share with you that picture on the left. Now, some of you might have seen something not dissimilar. That's a spray of water when a toilet is flushed with the lid up. That is water that's got contaminants in it. It's got all sorts of bacterial, virus elements within the water droplets. When you flush a toilet with the toilet seat up, that will come out and will literally hit the wall of the cubicle and will then stay there for a number of days. It's a big issue in terms of the hygiene and cleanliness. I've got a church that I go to, and I had to share with them that their practice of saying, well, we put hand wipes out so people can hand wipe down the toilet seat. They can hand wipe separately the handle of the toilet, etc. Whilst good, is such a small impact on the fact that these germs and particles are floating around in the air. Those are what where the issues come. I'm certain there are many medical people on here who will, better than I, know that the body has a great ability to get rid of these sort of viruses, and it does it through feces and urine. That's why it's in toilets. And so we have seen over this pandemic a greater demand to have the toilet lid closed. Our toilet will not flush without the toilet lid being closed. When you close it, it flushes automatically. And that saves around about 95% of the impact. So that's the contaminants that I talk about there. We close the flush. There's about 99% of those contaminants and then flush down to the sewers. There is a lid and latch which are impregnated with a thing called SteriTouch. Many hospitals will be well aware of that. They'll have that in many of their sites where they're doing operations, and so are continually kept cleaner than normal. We also have a transparent lid. That's just a minor element, but it means that when people come in to use it, that they can see that the unit's clean and ready for use. So what are the main elements of doing this? Well, they are, I've talked about the hygiene, and I'll move on to the other two main elements, which are the fact that we use a 1.5 litre flush. We are able to do that because the toilet we use is a toilet called a Propel-Air. So in other words, it's pushing a small amount of air with water into the bowl and flushing the rest of that water away. It means that we can reduce the amount of water. For those who would maybe ask questions later, we've had a university study going on for about 18 months, which has happily proven that into the drainage system, 1.5 litres is absolutely fine. You wouldn't want to go any lower than that, but it's not going to cause any issues to the drainage system. But what you are doing is saving 84% every time they're flushed. And trust me, in hospitals, the numbers of toilets that you have, the large number of 24/7 access to those means that the number of flushes is huge. It's in hundreds and hundreds of thousands. We're also impacting carbon reduction, not in as big a way as a lot of the things that Becky and Julian have been talked about. I also run an LED lighting business, and I know that that has a huge low-hanging fruit impact on that. This is about the low-hanging fruit of saving water. That's what these toilets do separately. But as well as that, they also reduce carbon. They don't reduce carbon on the site. They reduce carbon in where the waste is treated. But it's the impact of installing these toilets on your site that will allow that waste carbon reduction to have an impact. And so it is part and parcel of your action and your gain. Obviously, they've been built to be used. You might well have seen some of these. They're out in places like moto services, places like McDonald's, and trust me, they get a lot of hammer and a lot of use in those. In most of the moto services, their average use is 237 flushes a day, and they live through that. In fact, before we put the toilets in there, their problems with maintenance were such that about 1 in 2 toilets were always closed, broken, lids broken off, etc., because they were just not up to the standard of that sort of an environment. We've reduced that down firstly to 13%, and then over another couple of years down to 9% as it currently is. So yes, things will still break, things will still get blocked up because they're toilets. That's what happens. But there is no impact on the maintenance bill going up, it's actually only going to go down. And one of the other things that people have noted is that because of the impact of the saving in that area, that they are able to spend money elsewhere. That's what saving is all about. The European Environmental Agency literally today posted that saving water as part and parcel of the whole impact of climate change management is vital, in the same way that Becky and Julian have talked there about saving and reducing the impact of cost of fossil fuels and other areas of utilities. Saving water is no different in its impact. We have to give the clever people, the scientists, the ability and chance to do more than they already know. There will be, in 10 years' time, there'll be things coming out that we don't know about at the moment at all. And we have to reduce what we're currently using to give them, and therefore our world, the chance to have a saving impact that allow those even better thought processes, even better processes and products to come through and have an even bigger impact on there. So I've tried to keep it down to about 8 to 10 minutes. I'm certain there'll be questions, but we are about saving the part of the planet that we can, one hygienic flush at a time. So my name's Nigel Codman. My details are on there. You can see that. And I look forward to hearing any of the questions in the Q&A. Thanks, Georgia.
Thanks, Nigel. Some really interesting stats there. 237 flushes a day.
Yeah, I know.
That's a lot. I'm going to jump straight into some of the questions that we have here. I think I've got one here from Ian. I think that this was maybe for you, Becky, or Julian. What a benefit analysis also, sorry, bear with me 1 second. Sorry, it was just throwing me off a little bit with the grammar. Was a benefit analysis also undertaken on the benefit of both quicker development timeframe, i.e. released poor buildings quicker, as well as the improvements creating value to the services provided from the building, i.e. patients were seen quicker with less issues? Were there any, have you seen any of those outcomes, Julian?
As part of the business case for Fose Hill, there was a fairly detailed analysis of the existing facility, because this just did replace an existing facility a couple of streets up, interestingly, in a porter cabin on a pub car park. And it's part of the strategic case for the creation of Fose Hill. I mean, the full business case can be seen online. If you search NHS business case for Fose Hill, you'll come across it. You'll be able to see the strategic context and financial and economic case associated with it. As part of the overall the cost analysis, perhaps not from a patient's being seen more quickly. The GP service is still the GP service, and we're in the middle of a COVID pandemic, so they're seeing less face-to-face than they were, though there is a steady stream going into Fose Hill at the moment. So yes, in part, but perhaps not to the level of detail that the questioner suggests.
I think that again, from some of the points that were made from this morning, and basically throughout the entire year we've been running events with sustainability partnerships, there always comes to the question sort of competing priorities in terms of various different types of sustainability. So, you know, we talk about sustainable outcomes, and we don't always necessarily mean environmental. Becky, you touched on it as well. You know, there are the economic elements of sustainability, because if we are to be a sustainable NHS, we need to be future-proof and we need to be economically sustainable. What I have heard recently, though, is that actually when it comes to procurement, the ecological side of the competing priorities is coming out not on top, but a little bit more than it had in previous years, where it was just sort of economic over ecological any day of the week. But we've seen that actually there is that change starting to appear now. What do you think, Becky? How do you think that we should navigate between those two competing priorities, and also on top of that, regulation as well? Because, you know, again, we talked this morning about one of the huge impacts that came in over 2020, 2021 was the use of single-use masks. And I don't think that we even still have the real numbers or idea of the actual impact that that had in terms of the production and then the single-use nature of them. Sorry, I feel like I've just gone completely off course. Did you get a question out of that, Becky, that you were able to answer?
I did, yeah. And I think it's not just about the sort of the economic and environmental, the social elements as well.
Yes, exactly.
So the Social Value Act, you know, you're going to have to explicitly show your social value commitment up to 20% for procurement. So that's a really big requirement. So we need to think about that in the round. So absolutely.
And Nigel, are you seeing? I don't know if what your solution costs in comparison to what normal procurement would go for, but are you seeing the difference between the mindset around looking for ecological over economical?
Absolutely, and Julian, I think, touched on new build. The difference between our toilet and what we'd call a standard toilet in build terms in any sort of commercial property is that it's about twice is our toilet. But then there's the payback because we're saving against that toilet. In the new build, therefore, what you're doing is offsetting only the difference. And that will often mean that it will pay back in 1 to 2 years. At the other end, we're actually taking toilets out. In one particular hospital, we took toilets out that had only been put in 9 years before and put our toilets in because the payback was, in their case, between 2 and 3 years. So the payback is very, very low. The reason I mentioned LED lighting is it's in that sort of ballpark of low-hanging fruit of saving and payback. Payback is what's going to drive people like procurement to reach a conclusion about this, quite rightly.
Yeah, and we had an event last month on sustainable construction, and one of the speakers that we had there were sustainable window installers, and they were talking about hospitals that were just bought that were just built in the 90s, which I don't know about you, but I just see as sort of, you know, last year. Obviously it's, you know, it's 20 years ago, and if not more, and you know, they were taking out all the single glazed lead windows out of hospitals and replacing them with far more sustainable alternatives when it comes to insulation. And I guess there is the whole question around retrofitting as well. It's been a current theme throughout all of our events, where actually we're talking about an estate, and again you touched on it, Becky, as well, about the estate being a very aging estate. It's not the easiest thing to, you know, we've got amazing examples like Falls Hill, but you have to look at some of those specifically city centre estates where you can't even potentially retrofit things like new windows because they're graded buildings. Julian, you've got your hand up there. Did you have something that you wanted to contribute to that?
Yes, only that I can bore for England about Falls Hill and frequently have, but the passive approach is a fabric first. The windows that you can see behind me, they're not double glazed, they're triple glazed.
Bulletproof.
You know, well, borderline, yes. From a secure by design, from a police assessment point of view, they're going, wow, you know, it's, and yes, the availability, they did come from Europe, but the whole approach from a passive point of view, it is fabric first. The heating source within the building is people and equipment. Fundamentally, there is a small heating system, but fundamentally this is a very airtight, heavily insulated on all 4 sides building. So it is fabric first. And from a water point of view, just picking up Nigel's point, traditionally in in hospital and health environments, you have recirculating hot water. Not in Fose Hill. There's no recirculating hot water. It's all point of use. So if you want to fill it, make a cup of tea, you boil the water you need for the cup of tea. It's not, there's no kettles. It's all in point of use heaters. So we're not actually using energy that we're never going to use. So we're not heating water for heating water's sake. And it has multiple benefits. We're going to use less water. Yes, absolutely. I'm interested from a toilet and a flushing point of view, because I think that we maybe missed a trick there. But in addition, we're actually monitoring the water consumption in the building. I've got sensors in the building. I can go and check online and see how many cubic meters we've actually used or operated since it was opened, and we can cross-check that back so we can see, have we got a leak? You know, drinking water is a valuable commodity. Don't waste it. We need to measure and monitor, and it's all very well putting these very sustainable buildings in place, but if we don't know that they're performing as they were designed, either better than or worse than, and if they're performing worse than, we need to know instantly. We need to be able to see how they're performing and be able to look at what's the corrective action. Is there a culture shift? Is there a culture change that we need to adopt? But I can do talk to me later or anybody wants to know more about it.
Well, I have been told to please mention that there is more details about Fose Hill on the CHP homepage with videos and a case study. So please, everyone, go to visit that site. And do you know what the URL is, Julian? Do you know what the?
I couldn't.
It's okay. I put you on the spot there. I'm sure that we can share it in our
www.communityhealthpartnerships.co.uk, because it's on our website. So if you put CHP website in, be careful, CHP, there's another CHP within the UK, which is a community housing project in Essex.
Right. Well, we'll put a link anyway on our write-up so that everyone's able to navigate straight to that. Just picking up on your point there about the the sensors. Oh, so okay, we've got it here. Rebecca's put it in the. She's quick on it. I'll put it in the chat. She's put it in the Q&A. There you are. That's the link there for everyone to go and visit. Yeah, picking up on your point around sensor technology, we did have an event earlier in the year about cutting edge technologies that could be implemented within the NHS. And honestly, when you talk about monitoring and management, that's, we need to have that information. If we have that information in real time, not only can we talk about corrective procedures, we can also implement so much technology over data that we get through sensor technology to understand through algorithms actual preventative maintenance. And I'm sure that you must be looking at that kind of stuff as well, especially with your PV. Yeah,
no, without a shadow of a doubt, yes. There are about 115 sensors in Fose Hill measuring almost anything, but including utilisation, use of the space, energy consumption, water consumption, PV generation on the roof, and it's fundamentally live online. I can literally go in and see how many people are in the building at this moment in time. So it will help us from a maintenance and a preventative maintenance point of view. Just saying that we're going to service the building every year says, why? Let's service it when it needs doing, or when we can see an indication of performance dropping off on a point of use water heater. Let's go change out the element. Do we change it every 5 years? No, we change it when it needs changing. When its performance drops, then rather than just unplug it, plug it back in, and just because it's 5 years, we'll change it. But
it's all about the data, isn't it? What you can use. Nigel, did you?
I was just going to tap onto that data. We are just literally launching out a revised version of our toilet that will be connective to building management systems, because we know that this is the future. We know that the requirement of things like BREEAM excellence, which we've got in terms of the build, but also things like ISO 14000 and organisational requirements to actually, as Julian has quite rightly said, to manage better the whole of their understanding of their data utilisation of energy, water, whatever it may be, and their responsiveness to assets. And so, you know, if you've got 200 toilets on a site, and one of them, for example, goes down, you need to know which it is and be able to get to it. And that whole issue of connectivity and being able to measure that is vital to the future, we think.
We do have another question here from Timothy. He asks, how may need for increased air turnover and ventilation following COVID-19 affect the design principles and energy requirements of passive house buildings? And this again is for you, Julian. Yeah.
Yes, no, it's a very valid point. The HTM was updated in July this year, and clearly FOSA was undertaken as a pre that the new guidance coming out. FOSA is very airtight. It's a passive principle, very airtight. So there is constant ventilation flowing through the building, fresh air in, stale air out, through old money F7 filters going through a mechanical ventilation heat recovery unit. So what we're creating is a very stable and pleasant environment. Clinical consult rooms, 6 air changes an hour, based on people and building regulations, and then the 2 treatment rooms, it is elevated to 10. There is still a lot of unknown and research going on around COVID and airborne, and should we actually increase the air change rates? If we did have to increase the air change rates, yes, the energy consumption would go up, but how much would it go up if you want to move from 10 air changes to say 15? It won't be huge because you're already moving a big volume of air. There isn't a definitive answer. We're hopeful that using FOSA we'll be able to monitor and check and validate how it's all working, and maybe that will assist and inform future iterations of the HBN and HTMs that come out.
I mean, there really is a definitive answer, Julian, so I didn't want to put you on the spot there, but we did actually run an event earlier in the year with PHS specifically about the air quality conversation. Sorry, Nigel, I just jumped in there over you. One of the main concepts that they brought up was the fact that actually air quality is such an important aspect of overall health, because the amount of hospital admissions because of respiratory diseases, because of pollution, is just this horrible catch-22 vicious cycle of the NHS pollutes more, therefore more people get respiratory diseases, therefore more people have to go into the NHS and the estate grows, and it just goes on from there. So sustainable air quality solutions are right up there on the agenda. We've talked quite a lot about those, so it's quite interesting that, again, that's another theme that seems to be coming right out throughout our events. Go on, Nigel, sorry about that.
No, I was just going to say, not anything we do, but we have a couple of partners that we work with who work in the area of UVC technology. Julian, I'm certain you're aware of that. And its impact, particularly just at the point before the fan is starting to push the air around the building. If it's actually filtrated through a UVC light membrane, then effectively anything that's in there is going to be killed at that point in time. Now, I think that's a long way off before it starts to become adapted in a lot of places, but I think it has a lot of benefits to be looked at.
And that was one of the parts of that talk earlier in the year as well. Anyone can feel free to go back on our website and watch that video back. So I'm just about to come to the end of our session today. What I did want to do was just share a link to the Sustainability Partnerships Awards. This is something that's happened every year, not necessarily under our guise. Initially, it was the Sustainability Day of Action, and there were awards run every year. Since me and my partner took over Sustainability Partnerships, we wanted to make sure that we carried on with that. Unfortunately, we aren't able to do them in real life. It is going to be a webinar, but we've had loads of people, both from the NHS and the private sector, submit awards submissions to us for their sustainability awards. So we can't wait to have an event where we're just looking to, you know, give out a bit of recognition where it's deserved. So I put a link there for anyone who wants to attend that event and wants to see who we've got up for the awards in both the NHS Trust and the public sector side of things. This whole event has been recorded, as we do with all of them, and we did with this morning's event. Both will appear as blog write-ups on the sustainabilitypartnerships.co.uk website. You'll be able to watch the whole event back. You'll be able to get links to everyone's websites, email addresses, and any other information that you need. It will also be going out across all of our social media platforms. So other than that, I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who signed up and attended our event today. And then again, Becky, Julian, Nigel, thank you so much for giving up your time and giving up some insight and your own personal experiences and some great solutions that I think that we can start to look hopefully within the procurement within the NHS.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. No problem at all.
Thanks very much, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.